I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Kristie Guard. Kristie is from upstate South Carolina. She has been married for 28 years and has 5 children and 4 grandchildren. She just published her first book, Healing Ever After, in August of this year. Welcome to the show, Kristie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am so glad to have you today.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, we had a nice little side conversation here, so I'm excited to bring it to the mic now and hit record.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
So I have worked in mental health for 18 years, and about 4 years ago, my husband decided that he wanted to get out of the city, kind of leave the rat race of life and move to a country with a slower pace of life, which 4 years later, I can say that that is an illusion. You know, the rat race of life is just here. It's what we're living in, and we can't escape it. But nonetheless, so when we moved to this new town, I did not start working right away, or I haven't started working at all, but being in the same job for 18 plus years and coming to a farm, I had absolutely no idea what to do. You know, we left a city, now we're on 13 acres. And so here I am. So my background is mental health.
Okay.
And I am a helper. I'm a teacher, I'm a leader, and my spiritual gift is exhortation. I love encouraging people, and it's just, obviously it's a gift, but it is a passion. And I believe that that's what gifts are. They are passions from the Lord. So with that, we just trying to figure out my new life here, navigating it. We started with getting some animals and learning about life on the farm and raising children on a farm and planting a garden and all that. And I loved it because I love learning new things.
Yeah.
But what I realized was I did not feel like I was being able to use my gifts and talents the way that I was. And I was missing that. And part of my identity is wrapped up in that. That is not who I am, but it is how I fulfill my purpose, right?
Sure.
So on this farm with this new life, I knew that I needed to do something. Where can I still be Kristie? How can I still use my gifts and talents? Yeah. And I really prayed about that for a long time.
Sure.
And the Lord, he just put it on my heart one day that I needed to write a book, there was a situation, a story that I have, about my marriage and a journey that we had been through that happened about 20 years ago, 18 to 20 years ago. And so, I have wrapped that up. It's been dealt with and processed, but the Lord put that on my heart that I need to write a story about that. Yeah. And so with this new beginning and sitting here trying to figure out what my next step in life was, came about this book.
How long did it take you to figure out? Because I imagine when you first moved to the farm, I mean, there's a bit of overwhelmingness, right? As well, like you're just learning new things, and so it's easy to get lost in just getting thrown in this new life, right? How long did it take you before you felt like, wait a minute, this isn't fulfilling my purpose here?
It probably took less than 3 months because
I'm impressed.
It wasn't long. Well,
yeah.
You're moving in and you're unpacking and you're exploring the area. Like I said, we had 13 acres. So there was a lot here, and it's a really cool little area. So we would have, and we moved in the summer. So we would have fun going out and picking berries and seeing new flowers that were emerging and sometimes seeing wildlife. And we had a creek and, so things like that were new and exciting in the beginning. And at the same time, I'm unpacking and I'm trying to make this house now my home. Trying to make it cozy and warm. So you're kind of busy in the busyness. And when we are in the busyness, it kind of throws our feelings in the background, right?
Yeah.
So what happened, I kind of felt like, so I had this she shed. I call it a she shed. It's
I
really
love it.
a little pool house, but
Okay.
we downgraded. We didn't, I say downgraded, but we went from about 4,000 square feet to
Okay.
1,200 square feet top and bottom. So
Wow.
I had a lot of stuff. And so we had this pool house, but I call it my she shed. So that's where I had like a lot of totes stored that I didn't know what to do with. Where are they
Okay.
going to go? Because we had no space. So during this all, so we moved in the summer of 2019 and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So we got through the summer and then the holidays come and then COVID happened right after that. So around this time, my husband was an essential worker, so he still went to work. So here I was home
Okay.
alone on this farm with these children with no one near
Yeah.
me. So that was what essentially I felt like made me start feeling like I'm losing my mind. And so I
Okay.
processed through, was it just the move and me not being Kristie, or was it sitting home alone with no connection or community or outlet, right?
Yeah.
So when my husband would get home, I would say, I'm going out to work, go through these totes in the she shed, which was legit because I really did. There was things that I needed to find, but so what happened is I came across this tote, and it talks about this in the book, but I came across this tote that I've had for the last like 20 something years. And it
Yeah.
always sat in my attic and it was full of cards and notes and journals. So my husband and I started dating at 14.
Okay.
And I am not a saver, but I have saved every note that he ever wrote, every card and all that. But also, so that was in the tote, but also in this tote was these journals of this really hard time that I
Okay.
talk about in the book. So when I unpacked this tote, I didn't necessarily know what tote it was. And I just sat there and I started reminiscing. And as I was reading these notes and these journals, it's like the impact of what had happened just flooded me. And it really brought me to tears for one, but it brought me
Yeah.
to my knees, just praying and thanking God for what he had delivered my husband and I through during that time. And so that was like the first seed that was planted, right?
Okay.
During this pandemic, I found myself going back out there in the afternoons, like, I need a break. The kids are yours. I'm going out here. And
Yep.
I kept finding myself going back to that tote, reading those notes. And one day I felt God saying, during this time when I said I was praying for a purpose or like how God can help me use my gifts and talents, I was really like, you have an idea in mind. Like you're praying, but like, God, if you
Sure.
can be a friend, that would be good, right?
Yeah. I have the idea. You just need to give it to me.
Exactly. So as I was doing that, that is when God said, like, you need to write this book. And so I really wrestled with God about why would I write a book? Like I barely tell anybody about this time. This is the
Yeah.
shame of my life. This is the guilt. These are bad choices. We're not who we were. Why would I tell the world about these people? And
Yeah.
especially, I just moved to a new town who no one knows me. Why would I tell this stuff? Right.
Yeah.
And so through that, I really did keep feeling the Lord on my heart saying, you need to write this book. And so I just had this, it was kind of like a breakdown one day with the Lord. And God, why do I write this? And God said, now is the time. You see what's happening in the world. You see, the breakup of marriages, you see the infidelity, you see the addictions and the struggles, you see what's going on. You know that because you were in mental health, right? You knew
Yeah.
that firsthand. But take a look around outside of your work. Look at your friends. The same thing is happening. And
Yeah.
people need to hear this. People need to know. And you sat there and thanked me nights ago for bringing you through the fire and restoring
Yeah.
your marriage and redeeming you to me, your soul, reconciling mine and Jesus's relationship. And he was like, I heard it as clear as day. Like, I have the same thing to offer everyone else that I gave you. And I need
Wow.
you to let them know. And you can go out. I mean, I just felt it
I
on my
have the
heart.
chills.
Yeah, you can go out there and you can proclaim the hope of Jesus every day.
Yeah.
But people want to hear what he's done to you. That makes it more
True.
personal, that makes it more intimate. That is where connections and vulnerability and like true hope is formed. Like if I see that Jesus has done something for you, then that gives me hope that he can do it for me too. And so when the Lord told me that, I was kind of like, okay, okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have no idea how to write a book.
Okay, that was going to be my next question for you is have you written anything before? Or so you get this message and you're like, okay, wait, I got to do something with this now.
No, I have not. So I think that I really wrestle with this because obviously this is a question that comes up a lot, right?
Yeah.
I wrestle with this answer because it's kind of the same thing. Like I'm a runner. Okay. So I
Okay.
run half marathons and I recently started running marathons. And for the
Wow.
longest time, people would say, "Oh, you're a runner." And I'm like, I'm not a runner. I just run, but like,
Yep.
I, does my time qualify me as a runner? So like it was sort of one of those things where I finally had to own that I am a runner. So it's like, now, are you
Yeah.
a runner? Yes, I'm a runner. So the thing came up with, oh, you're a writer. And it's like, no, I'm not a writer. And they're like, but you're writing a book. I'm like, I know that's right. That's weird, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I really struggle with this question for a bit, but I think that I have now taken full ownership of it.
Well, you
But
have a published book
I
now.
have
You
to, right?
should.
I
Yes.
have to. I know. That's what's so weird about it because even though you see yourself as this and a title is attached to you, it's sometimes hard to comprehend that you really are that person.
Yeah.
It's like assigning a new label to your,
Yeah.
I say credentials, but not really. But I
And
don't
it
feel
creeps up on you. I mean, I think exactly what you're saying, right? It creeps into your world, right? And it like this insidious onset, right, of it. And then all of a sudden, bam, here you are. And, like it's the same with the podcasting, right? It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess I am a podcaster now.
it's right because in your mind you're still the same person you were yesterday,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's just now someone has assigned something else to you. So going back to that, so no, I don't necessarily consider myself a writer, and never ever ever have I ever thought about writing a book. Like some people have a passion
Sure. Hmm.
for books, they have a passion for writing, English, grammar, that is their forte. No, that was not mine. I, however, will say, being a leader, a teacher, a caretaker, and having encouragement as my spiritual gift, I love people and I love to talk,
Yeah.
right? So I like to say that I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, I started writing a little blog, and it was really just about my family and but it wasn't like we went to the store, it was like lessons that I have learned along the way because I mean, I am 47 years old, but I
Okay.
feel like that I have about 87 years worth of experience behind me because my husband and I got married. I mean, I started dating my husband at 14, got
Okay.
pregnant at 17. We got married
Wow.
at 18. I had 3 children by the time that I was 21. And
Wow.
so then, I went back to school to do something for me once they got a little bit older.
Yeah.
And then, the book tells most of this, but what I'm saying is like, I have a lot of life
Yeah.
experience.
You've lived a lot of life.
I don't want to say wisdom,
Yeah.
but it's lessons learned, right?
I think that sometimes in telling our stories, I think so much we want to feel like we're not alone in what we are feeling, right? Or our experiences. And so when you're telling people your story, it's like, well, I don't want you to feel alone. And I can't be the only one that has ever experienced this in life.
Yes. And that is something I want to touch on at the end because that is something that's so funny that you brought that up because that is something that the Lord truly revealed to me. But going back to the question, so
Yeah.
I started writing this blog, and it was just about like lessons that I'd learned from raising teenagers or lessons that I had learned about my marriage or, things. It was really like kind of mistakes made, lessons learned, and the
Yeah.
journey with God along the way. So I was just sharing stories. And that really brought a lot of, I guess, following or interest. And
Yeah.
I never anticipated to. I kind of felt like it was just going to be, because I journaled a lot. So I thought, and I have all these stacks of journals. So I thought, now I'll do it digitally because this is coming, right? This is,
Yeah.
you now have this technology or the system to do it. And now I'll have all these journals laying around wondering what I'm ever going to do and I have like totes full, but still,
Wow.
the tree shed. So anyway, so I wasn't necessarily feeling like I was called to ever write a book, but I do feel like that God has always allowed me to have a talent for storytelling and sharing. And I think part of caring and loving and encouraging kind of walks side by side with that. And that is where that passion and desire was formed. So writing the book was totally foreign to me, though. It was a whole different story to go on and tell somebody like this happened, or just to encourage, like, make time for your spouse, just the silly, and I say silly, but just the little things of encouraging, or, a lesson learned about my baby going to college, and like how I handled that and didn't understand that you can truly grieve for your baby's going to college. I thought it was the weirdest thing, but now that I'd went through it, I wanted to like share that with others and say, mamas, it's okay to grieve. Let yourself grieve. Know that this is a part of the process. So the blogging started out as that. Okay. And so when the book came along, I was like, but I have no idea how to write a book.
How do I put this together? Yeah.
And it made me question, like, God, did I hear you right? Like, do you want me to just write a blog about it? Why don't I just write a blog about it? And I felt strongly. It was a strong feeling of, I knew what he was telling me to do. So from there, it was like, will I answer the call of obedience?
Yeah.
So my book talks about how I learned obedience the hard way.
Okay.
So I'm no stranger to hearing God and knowing that when I hear God, that we have a choice to make, and will we, obey, or will we not? And I've made enough bad decisions in my life and seeing the consequences of not obeying. And I also see how he almost always brings me full circle when I disobey, back to the very same thing that he asked me to do in the first time. And, after that circle, it's kind of like you're now surrendering. So you end up doing what he asked you to do anyway. You should just do it the first time.
Yeah, just got to surrender to it.
It's all surrender. So
I think as you're talking, I'm thinking of this. It's a video I've seen floating around on social media, and it's a shepherd trying to rescue a sheep from like a ditch. Have you seen this?
Yes.
And the sheep, he finally wrestles this thing out, and then it literally like runs maybe 5 feet out into the field, and then it turns right back in and jumps right back into the ditch. And I think it had specifically on there, like, when I'm not listening to what God told me to do.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That is a story, I think, of all of our lives. And I think that the key for me is now recognizing early on that what the Lord is trying to do, and just surrendering to, okay, this is your will.
Yeah, I think it's also really beautiful that I imagine things that you've talked about in your book, or experiences you've had in your life, they're painful, right? They are painful when you're going through them. And I have really tried in my mind, whenever I'm going through something that, I'm like, God, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be going through this. I understand you have a plan. I might not understand why I'm here. And, we're kicking and screaming. We really don't want to go into these moments of pain, but it's inevitable. We're going to have these experiences in our life. But I'm always asking God, what is the purpose of, what is the purpose here? Because I almost want to make it like you're saying. I might be forcing it a little bit, but like, it's like, I want to know what the life lesson is going to be. If I'm going to walk through this pain, I want to know what the life lesson is going to be. But it does help me with a mantra in my mind to kind of like just settle into the pain, I guess, if you can do that. But there's going to be a purpose here. I don't understand it now, but there's going to be a purpose here. And I just have to walk through it.
Yes, that exactly describes the process of my book. It was probably the most painful thing that I've had to experience. I say that I think it was one of the hardest things that I've done, physically and mentally. One, had to learn to do something new, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something that's funny. Like I Googled how to write a memoir.
I
So,
love that.
like, again, if I can Google how to write a memoir and have a published book, there's hope for y'all. So,
Yeah.
so this writing process was very hard. When I heard God telling me to write the book and trying to figure out how to do it and all that, I went through and started reading these journals from this time, right? And these journals, they hurt because it had been 18 years since I had thought about that Kristie and that Clark, right?
Yeah.
I almost did not recognize those people in that book. It was almost as if I was reading about someone else and my heart hurt for them. And I had
Yeah.
to keep reminding myself, like, this is you. And like
Yeah.
sometimes I would read and I'd be like, that's so dumb. And then I'm like, you did it. You
Yeah.
so it was really hard to go back and visit those people, the people that we were, the choices that we made. But at the same time, it was almost refreshing because it was like another hallelujah. Thank you, God, for delivering us from this fire.
Yeah.
We could still be those people, but thanks to you, we are not. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a Thanksgiving time as well, but it still hurt. It hurt.
Sure.
And then going through the book, when I first started writing, I thought that it would be, I felt like God was just telling me to tell my story, mine and Clark's story, right? But when I got in to the writing process and understood that I needed to show the readers how this story began, rather than just telling them, I had to go back a step further and incorporate my childhood, because
Okay.
my childhood was where a lot of the trauma, the pain, the
Sure.
I don't want it was where a lot of the lies, well, it is where the lies were formed, the lies
Okay.
that I carried into this marriage, the
Sure.
beliefs and the thoughts. So I had to take the readers back and kind of introduce them to my childhood and why I was molded into the person that I was molded into, why I believed. There's 5 lies in the book that I talk about that I believed, and I brought those into my marriage and was living those lies. And just for an example, like one was love is earned. I thought love was transactional. I thought it was
Sure.
production based. So here I am in this marriage trying to earn love. And during childhood, love was taken away if you did not perform well or if you were
Yeah.
bad. So you might be loved one moment and then not the next. And then you had to earn it back, right? So that's
Yeah.
what I was constantly doing in my marriage. And I couldn't understand why this wasn't working. So that was kind of a little digression there. But what I had to do was take the readers back to my
Sure.
childhood. And when I did that, I've went through therapy. I did intensive therapy during this period that my husband and I walked through. And
Okay.
I learned about the trauma of the childhood and I processed that and I healed from that back then. But going back now, 18 years later, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm 47 now. I'm not 28 anymore, right? You're a whole different person. So the
Yeah.
way that I comprehended and processed back then, and what with all the life lessons in the middle of 28 to 47, you still see things differently. You might have healed, you might have learned, you might have forgiven, but now you
Yeah.
see things differently because now I'm a mom of not only 5 children, but some adult children. Now I'm a grandma. So it kind
Yeah.
of starts, back then when I went through therapy and was forgiven and learning, I was a young adult with small children. So
Yeah.
now on this side, it gave me a different perspective. It didn't
Yeah.
change or erase the scars and wounds that had happened back then, but it started to give me a little more grace for my parents,
Yeah.
which was a whole new avenue of perspective.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I've thought that so many times too. It's like as I've gone in this journey of parenting, right, of like giving perspective on your parents, because it is hard. The
And
day to day can be hard.
it's painful too, because what I realized during that process was I thought that I had forgiven my parents, but I hadn't truly forgiven my parents. But my dad is deceased, so I couldn't
Okay.
necessarily, that was a final chapter.
Yeah.
And the thing that I realized, like one of the questions I get asked a lot is like, why didn't you tell this? So people will read my book and they're like, oh, I could have used this 5 years ago. I could have used this 10 years ago. Or like, Kristie,
Yeah.
this is such a good story. Why didn't you write this a long time ago? And, I don't know. First of all, I never had an idea or a desire to put it out there. But
Sure.
what I do know is that God knew, and he knew that the book was needed when it was needed. Like the time is now, right?
Yeah.
And I knew that. But what I learned during the process is how God orchestrates everything that he asks us to do, or every purpose or thing that he asks us to carry. There's a reason for it. There's such
Yeah.
a time as this, and the time is now. So we don't need to get too far ahead of him, right?
I also think you need to get far enough out from the events too to be able to process them because of how emotional it sounds like they are. And so you need to be far enough away from that to be able to process it, to write it down, would be my guess.
You do. You
Yeah.
you can't teach somebody something that you haven't truly healed from. And
Yeah.
even after you heal from something, I feel like that you need to live it for a while for it to become integrated into your everyday life,
Sure.
right? So what I had no idea this was ever happening, but what I saw and is how God already has everything ordained, and it's for a reason, and it's for a purpose. It is for our purpose, and it's the way that he comes along and carries us through this, right? So as I'm writing this book and I'm getting this new perspective and having so much more grace for my parents than I ever had, and seeing them through a different lens. And I'm writing this book, and I'm a little bit aggravated too, because now I do have adult children, and I think about the way they raised me, and then I thought, what? Why would they do that, right? But not only that, but so I come through and I'm writing this book, and then my brother dies. My brother
Oh my
overdoses
gosh.
at
Wow.
32 and passes away. And so the book tells a little bit about how, I have been estranged from my mom for like 15 years because of
Okay.
trauma and parenting and stuff, right? So I make a decision to go visit her during my brother's funeral, and how, I go in with such hardness,
Yeah.
but it is a survival skill that I learned. And even though
Hmm.
I thought I'd process all this and forgiven her, when you get in a room with her and all
Hmm.
those feelings and emotions, I mean, your body, it remembers.
Yeah.
It triggers, so seeing her was a trigger, and I was like, I'm just here for the funeral and blah blah blah. But anyway, what I'm saying is the Lord orchestrates all of this book was a tool to help me get through the death of my brother, but also the death of my brother opened up the visit with my mom.
Yeah.
And from that, I have been growing in my spiritual walk, and God really convicted me. Well, first of all, he showed me that I have not forgiven her like I thought I had. And so during this time, I had to work on that. Like, if I want to continue growing in
Sure.
my spiritual walk, I have to forgive her. And so it was during this book that showed me I hadn't forgiven her. And then it was through my brother's death that gave me the opportunity to actually not just say, hey, I forgive you,
Yeah.
like pray the prayer and forgive her, but put that into action, walk it.
Sure.
So from there, my mom and I had started a relationship, and we hadn't
Okay.
had a relationship in 15 years. And I forgave her, and I let her know that I forgive her. And we kind of started this really, it was still very awkward, but it was a relationship, and I felt free in my heart. And
Yeah.
then the Lord gave me 6 months of that, and then she died.
Oh my goodness.
So had this
Wow.
book never happened, I,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm saying. The Lord orchestrates that. The Lord healed my heart of that unforgiveness for her and gave me 6 months with her,
Yeah.
and then she died.
Do you
So
think she felt that too?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. I
That's
really do.
beautiful.
Isn't it though? And so that's like, this book was needed for this time. And it wasn't just
Yeah.
needed for the readers, it was needed for me, it was needed for my
Sure.
family. So, yes, writing this book was a very painful process. And when I first started it, I'm like you, like what you said, what is the purpose? And in the back of my mind, because we try to form the conclusion to our purpose if we don't know it, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, God, you're asking me to write this book for all the people that will come that will need to hear it. And that was okay. That's obedience. I'll do it for that reason. But
Sure.
the Lord is so big and so good and so sovereign and so just all knowing. And he is like, I'm going to allow you to write this book. I'm giving you the desire to write this book because I know what's going to happen. God already knew my brother was going to
Yeah.
die. I already knew that my mom was going to die, but he was going to give me a treat in
Yeah.
allowing me to be obedient, if I were obedient, which I was, but
Yeah.
if I were obedient in writing this book, God had a blessing for me at the end. And that was the forgiveness and the reconciliation of my mother.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it just blows me away that God cares about such little things in our life.
Yeah. And
He
how patient he was. How many years was that, waiting to happen?
right.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, what did you learn about yourself in writing this book?
I learned a lot about myself. I felt like the first thing that I learned was that I'm stronger than
Yeah.
I ever thought I was. And I do think that I'm a pretty strong person, but I learned perseverance, like
Yeah.
continuing to just persevere in the tough times, standing, just standing in the pain. Like sometimes we just have to sit in the pain. There were days that I wrote this book that I would sit on my bed and cry because of the
Yeah.
memories or the anxiety that I felt on my heart. And not only that, but the enemy was working.
Yeah.
So um so many times I just wanted to quit and throw the book away or just delete. And what I learned was that it is okay to sit in the suffering. Sometimes it's okay to feel the pain. That's how we have to feel it to heal it.
Yeah.
So I allowed myself to sit there instead of running away from it. So I learned about long suffering and perseverance. And through that, as a result, I learned, you know what, Kristie, you're pretty tough. You can do
Yeah.
more than you think you can. Um, my relationship with the Lord got so much stronger. I was, constantly seeking him for the book, but not only that, I was learning these lessons about forgiveness
Yeah.
from my mom, and I was grieving as well. And the Lord was there to comfort me. So this was a time and a period. It was more than just a time, it was several seasons that, I mean, it was just like me and the Lord, and I sought him out like a bloodhound. And that grew me as a
Yeah.
person. It grew me with my relationship with God. And I think that as a result, that helped strengthen, the circles around me. It helped grow me with my husband. It gave me different perspectives. And so I'm very grateful for that time of writing this book, even though it took 2.5 years. And I thought this is absolutely ridiculous. um, I understand that the delays that were happening in that were actually like detours for
Yeah.
developing me into a different person, and I praise God for that. The other thing that I learned a whole lot about punctuation and grammar.
Oh my goodness, I would learn the same, I think. So, what do you wish now? What do you wish you knew back then before you started?
For the book in general, what I wish that I would have known was that just word vomit your first
Okay,
rough draft, right? Just word vomit. Just
get
go
it
through and
there.
write it all down. I didn't
Okay.
know that. So like here I am writing paragraph by paragraph, and then I'm rereading the paragraph and I'm like, oh, I need to fix that, or I need to fix that. And so of course it would take me forever to get out of
Yeah,
chapter 1.
I could
And
see that.
then so that was the number one thing, that just word vomit. Your first rough
Okay.
draft, word vomit it all out. The other thing that I wish that I knew was that half of what I wrote the first time, did not even make it to the final copy.
Oh, wow.
And that's okay.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
But like there would be stories that would come to my mind and I'd be like, no, I don't want that in there. And so then I would try to think of another one. But what it goes back to the word vomit everything. And then let
Okay.
someone else, your editor or someone else come through and pick out the stuff of substance because they're going to anyway.
Sure.
So
That makes
um,
sense.
so those are the two biggest things. I wish that I just would have,
Okay.
which it all goes back to I wish I knew how to write a book, but it's all
Yeah.
a learning process.
At this point, are you still writing?
Yes, I am right.
All right. Is your blog still active?
My blog is very much slowed down because of
Okay.
writing the book
Sure.
and just not having the time or the
Okay.
emotional energy to
Yeah.
after I've written for the last 2.5 years, but after I've written all day long to still turn around and write a blog.
Oh, yeah.
So that really it kind of came to a complete halt during those 2.5 years, which I'm sad because I had so many people like, well, I'm looking for another blog or I'm looking for another post or this or that.
Well, now you have a book.
I know. But with all the emotions that came with writing this book and how hard it was, and
Sure.
I did not have a single ounce left in me to continue with the blog. So now that the book is published and it is
Sure.
into the world, now I'm trying to get back into this, right? And so I started writing and I'm writing all these posts. And then because of the book, I have a social media manager and then I have a marketing manager. And so probably like 2 months ago, my social media manager came and she's like, Kristie, I got to talk to you. I was like, okay. And she's like, nobody wants to read those long posts anymore. You got to do videos. You got to do this. You got to do that. Like no one wants to read. No one's
Oh,
reading anymore. And I was like,
okay.
what happened in 2 years that I didn't know?
Wow.
She's like, the whole industry is changing and blogs and this and that aren't what they used to be. And people aren't seeking this. So now she's trying to teach me this new age technology and what people are looking for. And it has been so frustrating because again, this goes back to I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
How do I tell my stories or how do I make a point through these videos or
And in these short clips, right? Because I mean, that's the other part of it, I think,
so I'm
right?
trying to learn how to still offer and be who I am, who I was originally, who the person that resonated with these other women, how to be her and how to still be authentically
Yeah.
me and not copy all these other videos and posts.
Yeah.
When, I want to stand out. Everyone wants to stand out, but it's like everyone's blending in. All these posts are the same. Everyone's
Yeah.
feed aesthetically looks the same, all the colors. So it's like I'm being told, do this, but don't do this. Post this, but don't post that. Say this, but don't say that. It's like
Yeah.
keeping me in boxes, and I've never been someone to be kept in a box.
Yeah.
So I am now trying to learn how to authentically be me and not worry about likes and follows and
Yeah.
numbers, but about the audience that I'm speaking to, just
Yeah.
engaging with them authentically instead of blending in. So that's been a real challenge
Yeah. I
to
could
me.
see where that would be a challenge, right? And, but in saying that, your audience will find you, right? In that, like if you are authentically showing up as you, your message will find the people that it needs to find
I
as well.
agree.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yes. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So, what type of genres do you enjoy reading?
Mostly I am uh, probably in the religious category, but I do venture out. It depends on what I'm reading for. Am
Sure.
I at the beach? Do I just need a beach read? I love some Jodi Picoult, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I love her books. I love
Yeah.
the Carrie Kingsbury. Hers are religious, but they're telling story. They're still storytelling, right?
Yep.
But most of the time, I'm reading for a message. What kind, and I
Yeah.
hate to say self help because I don't believe in self help. I believe in help. But like someone wanted to put my book in a self help genre at a bookstore, and I was like, no, 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 can't do that. I believe that we tell a lot of stories that look like we're helping you, but just because we're helping you doesn't mean that it's self-help. Like this is
Yeah.
God speaking through us. So I do read a lot of those. I read a lot of like memoirs and
Sure.
autobiography, but I also anything that can grow me or teach me something more about Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like, for example, last year I read this book called The Face of Grace. And I
Okay.
thought, how can someone write a book about grace, right? We know what grace is, but it was for a book club. And so, I committed to reading it. And it was one of the best books I've ever read. Like, I did not understand grace the way that this book taught me about grace. I thought I knew about grace. I thought grace had a very simple definition.
Sure.
And maybe it does, but understanding that definition behind grace grew me and challenged me. It also like the whole purpose behind the book, The Face of Grace, was we can be taught what grace is, but until we have been shown grace, we can never deliver it. We can never
Yeah.
practice it. And that really encouraged me to like go back and look at the areas of when have I received grace, and how did
Yeah.
I accept it? Because not only receiving grace, but we have to be taught how to accept it. So we have to receive it, and we have to keep receiving it to be able to accept it in the way that it is meant to, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to receive grace because they feel like if I receive grace from you, then I owe you something. So just for example, that book, it just opened me up to how I think about grace and how I can practice it.
Wow. That's cool.
It really is. But most of the books that I do read, I will say, are always centered around faith and growing.
Yeah. How do you find time to read in your day?
It's very hard. I used to be an avid reader. I was reading a book. You would always see me with a book in my hand. Reading was a hobby for me, and it always
Okay.
has been. But ever since I started writing the book, well, first of all, I didn't have the time to read and write, but
Sure.
what I started noticing was the more that I was reading, the more and writing at the same time, I wanted to change my tone, or I wanted to change my style of writing, or like, oh, well, they explained it better, this or that. So, and I wasn't doing it consciously. It was really a subconscious thing, like, oh, I like how they tell their story, so I'm going to tell it like that. But I had to like stop. I had to take a
Yeah.
break from reading altogether so that I could just tap into my authenticity and write the way that I write instead of trying to copy. I think we always try to do that. We look at how someone else is doing, and if we like the way that they
Yeah.
do, I can incorporate that into my life, right? So for 2 years, I stopped reading altogether. I just couldn't do it. Other than the
Yeah.
Bible, I just couldn't do it. But now I have, like I said, last year, once I had my final manuscript submitted,
Okay.
I read 3 books.
Okay. Is that the three books you brought today to talk
Yeah,
about?
it is.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was going to actually ask you. So, how they kind of paired together.
They did. So the Face of Grace, I explained that one. It just gave a whole new perspective on grace. The other one that I read was John Ortberg, All the Places We Will Go.
Okay.
And that book happened upon me by chance. And I probably would have never picked it out. It literally fell into my lap. But it was a God thing, right? Nothing happens by coincidence. I
Yeah.
really think God sets us up for everything. He positions us all the time exactly where he wants us to be. We just have to open our eyes to be aware of that, right? So, and if I told you how this book fell into my lap, you would probably think I was crazy, but it was really so. During the writing process of my book, I
Okay.
kept kind of wrestling with, God, do you really want me to write this book? Are you sure you want me to write this book? No matter how many times he's already told you what he wants you to do, every time you hit a rough spot, you question yourself, right?
Yeah.
And well, I hit that rough spot because this is not where God wants me to go. Or I
Sure.
hit a rough spot because I heard God wrong. That is the enemy filling your mind. Okay. So, what I read in this book was that, yes, God positions us 4 things. God has a plan for us. He has a purpose for us. The big picture of all that is that we are here to glorify God and to advance his kingdom. Advances his kingdom is telling other people about him, right? So
Sure.
God gives us gifts. He gives us all. He equips us all with spiritual gifts. And God just wants us to use that. When I read this book, what it says was that, God gives us callings. He gives us a purpose, but he doesn't always necessarily set us up to give us 3 door A, B, and C, and then have us sit out here pondering, which door do I walk through? Do I write the book? Do I write the blog? Or do I start a speaking ministry? Right?
Sure.
And it's up to me to decide which one is the right answer. And sometimes we think, but if I choose the wrong answer, I'm doomed forever. Or if it's this mind game. It is a mind game that the enemy plays with us. But what this book clarified to me was, okay, so what if God gives us door A, B, and C? Does he care which one we enter? He just cares that whichever door we enter wholly. We enter righteously, that we represent him well, that we imitate him, that we carry his name through the door with us. And that took so much weight off of my shoulders of trying to consciously decide, God, do you want me to do this? Or do you want me to do this? Or do you want me to do this? It said, Kristie, relax, pray about it. And know whatever you do it with all your heart, as if you're working for God and not man. And that was an aha moment. It was a freedom moment. It took so much weight off of me.
Wow. I love that. And talk about that perspective shift, right? Of what I was saying earlier, if we just can show up like that, right? It's we just show up whole, right? And righteously. And here we are, and he probably designed that path for us anyways in the long run. So,
absolutely. I agree. It's just learning it and understanding and listening to him instead of the world.
Yeah. So that one was All the Places to Go by John Ortberg.
Yes.
Okay. And then what is the last book of?
So the third one was Uninvited by Lysa TerKeurst.
Yeah.
And that one was really important for me because I battled a lot with, okay, God, you told me to write this book and I'm doing it, but what if people don't like it? What if people say bad things about me? Or what if people say my book is bad? What if my grammar is really bad? Or what if people judge me for the choices that I made? We had just moved to this new town and, where we lived before, there's a lot of people that knew that story because they had walked that path with us, right? But now here we're in this new town and we are these people because we've been these people for the last 18 years. And this is the persona, and it's not a persona, but this is the life we're living. So what happens when this book comes out and people look at us and they're like, that's not who we thought you were. Yeah. So I kind of wrestled with that a bit of what will people think? Maybe I shouldn't put this book out.
The vulnerability piece of that.
Yes. I remember writing the last piece and I looked at my husband and I said, maybe I shouldn't push send. It was time to send it to my editor. And after 2.5 years of all this internal battle and everything that I just told you I went through, I knew this was the book to write. I was writing it for God. It needed to be into the world. But all the changing that God did internally to me, I had a moment of thinking maybe God just wanted me to write this book for me. Maybe it was a part of my healing process, right?
Sure.
So maybe it's really not meant for the world.
Yeah.
So I remember looking at my husband and I said, maybe I shouldn't hit send. I said, I feel like I've learned what God wanted me to learn through this book now. Yeah. And I feel good about it. And maybe that's what it was all about. And my husband looked at me and he said, it's not about you, Kristie. It's not about you. And I was like, thanks. But that was good to remember because everything that we do, it's not about us. The book with Lysa TerKeurst was about identity and being secure in who you are and carrying the process or the promises, carrying the promises and walking through the process of what God has asked you to do, carrying it with confidence and standing in that. So it kind of, it was a process too. It wasn't just I read this book and all of a sudden, okay, I wrote a book. I don't care what anyone says. But
Yeah.
it's a process of absorbing those words of God called me to do this. He's not going to let me fail.
Sounds like it just, I mean, how impactful that was to your life, right? It allowed you to hit send. It allowed you to step into it, and it allowed your book to now be published and out in this world, right? But really opening up your world so we can read it too.
Yes.
An incredible amount of vulnerability has to go into that.
Yes. Yeah, vulnerability is an understatement. And it's so funny because my book talks all about vulnerability. And you think that you learn something, and you do learn things in certain capacities, right? So, one of the biggest problems within my marriage was a lack of vulnerability on my part. And so,
Yeah.
I, at that time, had to learn about vulnerability and what vulnerability was, and how, we go back further of why why I would not share vulnerability. It goes back into trauma,
Sure.
right? And so you work through all this process, you work those steps, and then you have to take leaps of faith of practicing them before they actually become ingrained in who you are, right?
Yeah.
I'd learned that very well over the last 18 years in my marriage. What I realized was that I hadn't necessarily learned it in all aspects of my life.
Yeah.
I only needed to learn it in my marriage. That's what I was in therapy,
Sure.
right? And that's where I practiced it. And I got really good at it in that, but I hadn't got good at it at the rest of my life. And so reading this book of Lisa TerKeurst about that and writing that book showed me that vulnerability had to be displayed throughout my life.
I think that's a lesson we're probably, I mean, a lot of us could use to learn too. So,
One of the points in my book is that we can never become completely authentic without becoming vulnerable.
yeah.
Vulnerability leads to authenticity.
Yeah.
So think about that for a minute. Ugh, it's a
Yeah.
tough thought, but it's true. And there's so much
Yeah.
beauty when we can become vulnerable and raw and real. And I think that is where true friendship, true connection
Yeah.
starts.
Yeah.
It breaks past the superficialness of any relationship, and that's where the roots take hold. And
Yeah.
that's where beauty is displayed. When we can be real in our flaws, in our
Yeah.
weaknesses, and continue to show up and allow someone to see us that way and allow someone to help us, it strengthens both parties. It's not just a one-sided thing. It's just like me writing this book. I'm writing this book for other people, but God still strengthened me. It's
Yeah.
a process.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I think that's a beautiful note to end on there. Let's do really quick, though. I love to finish off with these bonus pairings of questions. So these are just speed round of questions. You can answer these really quick. Where is your favorite place to read?
In my bed.
Love it. And then what is one book that has changed your life?
Probably The Face of Grace, the one that I was telling you about, The Face of Grace, because it has not only helped me see the way that I experience grace on my own self when people hand it to me, but it constantly challenges me to continue extending grace to others, even if I have not particularly ever had to extend it in that capacity before.
Yeah.
But it helps how I think, and it helps form, like, it almost, because I have this knowledge in my brain, even though it's not automatic on how my body should react to it, it is
Sure.
there. So I use that to decipher how my actions in responding will be.
That sounds like a great book. I haven't heard of it and I haven't obviously read it then, but I'm definitely adding that to my 2024 reading list because that sounds really good.
It's a very deep book. It's not a beach.
Okay. That'll be my morning stack. I have my morning stack is like usually a spiritual nonfiction, something that I have to really spend some time with because by the evening my brain is mush. So that's when I'll pick up like a fiction read.
I wrote my book, I wanted to make it pretty simple, pretty low educational. And what I mean is that I wanted the everyday common person to be able to pick up my
Sure.
book and understand it, because sometimes
Yeah.
you read a book that is so hard that you just can't get through it, right? It has these
Yeah. It
big
takes
words.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did not want my book to be like that. So I wrote it on a very elementary educational level for that,
Okay.
on purpose. So know that was
Yeah.
intentional. But when this book, The Face of Grace, I would have to go back and read paragraph after paragraph again and like just absorb it. It is a lot of knowledge, but it's also written at a higher, I think,
Okay.
level.
Good to know. That's a really good tip.
So read it when you're alone, not on a car ride.
Yeah.
I tried that once.
And don't read it as an audiobook because you're going to want to go back and reread.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Really good tips. And then are you a rereader?
Some books, yes. Not very many, but there are a few books that I have reread if it really touched me.
Yeah.
Each book that I do read, I highlight the mess out of and I take notes in it.
Lastly, what are you reading next?
I have not picked up a book in the last few months on purpose. One is because my brain has about 47 tabs open right now.
Yep.
And I just do not have the mental capacity to open another thing, another tab, another book. I am in the process of trying to write a few studies, which is going to it kind of comes in with my book because it's taking you back. It's for women that maybe have trauma, whether big T or little t. And that's what we call trauma in counseling, big T or little t, because trauma doesn't have to be, trauma for me can be completely different for trauma from you, right?
Sure.
But it's still trauma. And that's what people need to understand. So many times people want to say, well, at least this didn't happen. I should be grateful, right? No, if it affected you, you need to work through it. So this piece that I'm writing is going to go back to the roots and touch on some trauma, whether it's your little t, and then walk through that and what a healing process looks like.
Yeah.
So that's one part. And then the other part, like I said, was a discipleship.
Yes.
So because I have been writing so much, I just can't put anything else. And of course, I always make sure that I am having my time in the Bible. That's very important. So you only have so much time in your day. You know this.
The bandwidth is only so far.
I have to use it wisely. And but I do miss reading. I really do. I miss reading. I have, these book clubs that I'm in and they're like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm coming back, I promise. Because
and there'll be a time for it in your life, right? Like there'll be a time and there'll be a space for it. And this right now, this season of life, it's focusing on creating, writing and creating. And you'll find time again. So, well, I want to wish you the best of luck with these adventures. I'm excited to hear what comes out of it. Keep me posted. Send me an email as they come.
Thank you.
I know your time is precious, so I really appreciate all you've given me to come on the show today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Kristie Guard and her book flight of books that helped her write her own. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.